back to ICE, to Internet Client Engineering. And what I'm going to do now is just to show you some tools that is in the Chrome browser. And you can find a similar tool in Safari as well. So if you go to View, Developer, and then go down to Developer Tools, you can see on the right hand side some information relating to this web page. And say if I load a web page, in this case the web page of the World Wide Web Consortium, what you can see on the right hand side is that there's a whole bunch of GET requests being submitted. As you can imagine, a web page has actually a whole range of types, right? So there are images, there are text files, there are all kinds of, there are style files, and so on. So if you look at this, this is, you can actually choose the device that you want to mimic. So in this case, I'm just going to choose, for instance, the some iPad, let's say, right? So, and this is what the page will look like on the iPad. But I bring your attention to what you see on the right hand side here, and here this timeline shows the download time of a particular web page. And notice that this is the first page that is obtained, right, which is a HTML page. And because this HTML page contains links to other images and other information, you can see that the HTML page is first downloaded, and then the style sheets, we're going to study style sheets later on. The style sheets used by the page are then downloaded, and then this is then followed by the images, the PNG files, portable network graphic files, as well as GIF files, and other, and even JavaScript code. There's all this whole bunch of related files are then downloaded in association to that, with that web page. And you can see on the right hand side here, time. This is the download time. And then the other components maybe up to several milliseconds to download. So that gives you an indication of how fast that page loads, as well as the size of the page and so on. Right? So that information is quite useful for assessing the download time of your web page. Of course, this will differ according to which computer you're using and according to what network you're in. Are you using a wireless network or Wi-Fi or 3G, 4G network or some other network, right? So the download time can be tested across different types of networks if you like. And you can see here the code is 200, and that's the HTTP response code from the server, which is it's okay, and these are GET requests. So the document, the style sheets, the images, they are retrieved using the HTTP GET request, as you can see here. And you can find something similar to this with in the Safari browser as well. Okay, so we're going on to part 3 concerning web design, graphics and animation. So the idea behind graphics is that it takes time to download. So you do not want to burden the users or cause the user to wait for large graphics to be downloaded, but yet such graphics, if they don't show real content just for decoration, it may cause unnecessary response time delays. So we have to think about every piece of image or video that we use on our website. Is it going to help? Graphics definitely should be labeled as much as possible, and watermark graphics in general are not so useful, but sometimes they do have an artistic function, right? So careful use of it will be good. Animation in general causes the website to look unprofessional unless it's carefully done. So cautious use of it would be good. And the key elements of the page, the title and so on, logo, we typically don't animate that. But if we have to include animation, allow the user to turn it on instead of having that turn on automatically. Font styles, we don't want to have a website with too many different types of fonts, too many different variations in sizes and colors, right? Because it makes the web page look unprofessional, it looks a bit funny. But having said that, there are some sites where you do want to make use of lots of colors and sizes and variations. For example, for websites for kids or specialized function websites. But in general, we don't want to do this. And we want to use high contrast text and background colors, right? So that it can be as legible as possible. In general, we want to avoid horizontal scrolling. So we fix the size of the page width according to the device that the web page is targeted for. And we avoid horizontal scrolling in general. But vertical scrolling is fine. And if there are important pieces of information on the web page, they should be viewable without scrolling, right? So that's, in other words, it hits the user immediately. Color coding, color combinations, color schemes for the web page, that's extremely important, right? So if you design a house, if you design almost anything, right, you want to pick the color schemes beforehand. And you can observe this if you go to web pages like the Woolworths page, or Myers or Kohl's, you can, for each of these websites, you can identify a handful of colors that relates to that company, right? So you find that many companies, or if you look at the Commonwealth Bank website, right, there's a handful of colors that, or less than a handful of colors that reflects the image, the branding of that particular company, right? In other words, there's a color scheme or a small set of colors for the Commonwealth Bank website, for the Westpac Bank website, for the La Trobe University website, and so on, right? So that's the color scheme. And you want consistency, right? So if you use a certain color for fonts, then stick to it. You use a certain color for certain things, stick to it, right? We want consistency. So a bit more about color, right? What is color, right? So a color is something that is perceived by the human being, right? It's just radiation, and if you got the right amounts of red, green, and blue coinciding at a particular dot on the screen, depending on how much red, how much green, how much blue that you have coinciding at a particular dot on the screen or at a particular pixel, that will determine the color of the pixel, right? So every pixel is determined by this different intensities of red, green, and blue, if you like. And different pixels have different colors because in each pixel there's a different intensity of red, green, and blue. So how do you specify the intensity of red, green, and blue that you want? Well, there are 16 colors that are standard. So each of these 16 colors have predefined levels of red, green, and blue, right? And you can just use the color by using the name of the color. For example, red, green, blue, gray, and so on. But there are, in general, millions of colors that you can use, right? So each color can be encoded, right? So remember, every color is constituted by some intensity of red, some intensity of green, and some intensity of blue. So if you wanted to generate the yellow, full intensity of red, full intensity of green, and zero intensity of blue. So yellow can be identified by those three numbers, and it's always in that order: red, green, blue. So if you look at the number of bits and so on, you're going to get 8 bits for each intensity. So 8 bits to describe how much of red you want, 8 bits to describe how much of green you want, 8 bits to describe how much of blue that you want. And in other words, there's 24 bits encoding for each color. And this is often called a true color. And the reason for that is because the human eye can only distinguish that number of colors, right? So in fact, the number of possible colors that you can encode with 24 bits is 16 million colors, and that's already more than the number of colors that the human eye can distinguish. So there's no point having more than 24 bits to encode color, right? Because the human eye can't even distinguish more than 10 million colors. And in order to save the number of bits to encode colors, right? Because color encodes are used so much in HTML pages, we use the hexadecimal system. Right? So we go from 0 to 9, and then you have A, B, C, D, E, F. Right? So using this hexadecimal system means that we use fewer characters to encode a number between 0 to 255. So for instance, that number there, yellow, can be identified by hash FFFF00 according to the hexadecimal system. Right? And that's the hexadecimal system when it's translated. So you notice here the advantage of the hexadecimal system. So if you look at the table below, 11 is B, 10 is A, 12 is C. Right? So in other words, if you wanted to encode the number 12, you don't need 2 digits, you don't need 2 characters, you don't need a 1 and 2, you just use C, which is 1 character. If you wanted to encode 13, you don't need 2 characters, 1 and 3, you just need 1, which is D. So you can see that for large numbers like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, with the hexadecimal system, you just need 1 character. But with the decimal system, you need 2 characters. So there's a savings in terms of number of characters used if you use the hexadecimal system. Here's an example of color code being used. BG color, text, and link. You can see the different colors being used. And when devising a color scheme, there's a whole bunch of colors that tend to go together. And there are some colors which are highly contrasting. For example, white and black. These two colors contrast significantly, right? And they're in a way complementary colors, right? In other words, if you choose two colors which are complementary, right, and because they are at extreme ends of contrast, you'll find that if you use one color for the background and the other color for the text, your information will stand out better, right? So there are all kinds of color schemes available. And if you look at existing websites, like these are the older version of the CBS website, older version of CNN website, you can identify a handful of colors that forms the color scheme of that website. So as a web designer, you do want to come up with your own color scheme suitable for the company. So these are the color schemes for the example web pages. And if you go to that website, there are many possible ideas for color schemes. So use logos when necessary. Logo is widely recognized by users. And these are the widgets that are typically used. And we'll see in the HTML labs how you can encode different types of user interface with widgets like menus, selection lists, text boxes, and so on. These are called widgets. Okay. And in general, you don't want to have multiple text entry boxes. That's not used very much, as you might observe. Drop-down menus are not the most efficient way to do something, right? Because you have to click on the drop-down menu for the menu to drop down and then select the link. So if you got a list of links, if you just have it there, the user does not need to then click on the menu to make it drop down and then have a second click to select the link. Right? You may as well just display the list of links there, and the user can just choose which link to use. Window titles, of course, need to be descriptive. For example, you might use the company or organization name. And in the title, you don't have to include the full domain name. You do want to include a short description of the site in the window title, right? That's very useful. And you don't want it to be too long, right? And remember that these window titles get added to the bookmark list. Right? If people add your site to the bookmark, you don't want it to be too long. URLs, right? So you do want URLs to be memorable, right? And there are some commercial websites that actually binds all the possible domain names just in case people type something wrong. Right? And here's another example, right? So if you got just a Singaporean website, it may stop at .com.sg, but if you wanted to go international, you might want to get a whole range of domains, including .com and .com.au and so on. Walmart has been very careful. They even buy the domain names not just for Walmart, but possible misspellings of the website as well. News and press releases, right? In order to be effective on a web page, you need to have headlines, you need to have decks. Headlines should be succinct yet descriptive, right? And should be as few words as possible, right? And you need to write and edit specific summaries for press releases and news stories. The main thing behind all this is that it should be succinct, should be scannable, right? As you recall. And perhaps with links to the full news story. And of course, you want to keep it up to date. And as you might find in many news websites, they show the most recent information first. Pop-up windows and staging pages, right? And this is not used that much. FedEx as an example, where you go to the fedex.com and then a splash page, and then from there you can choose which country that you want to go to. Right? Not often the most useful. Disney used to have a pop-up window, but it's been changed. Right? In general, pop-up windows are quite irritating. Right? So you can look at the Disney.com today and look at what its website looks like now. Advertising, right? So the key thing about advertising is should be placed at the site, right? Or at least in a well-defined area of the web page, and it should not be too overwhelming. So you don't want the user to be confused with the main contents. It's just advertising. Okay, and if you go to this website, there are a whole range of different types of design patterns. I mentioned the idea of breadcrumbs. So if you go to this website, you get some information about breadcrumbs. Okay, so now if you take a look at the user interface patterns, you have a whole range of different types of patterns that might be useful in your design. And you can search. Right? So let's search for breadcrumbs. Right? And in fact, it comes out. So I did mention breadcrumbs in the future. So what is it? Right? So that's an example of a breadcrumb. Right? So you can search for all kinds of patterns, and there are many other examples of that. And there are explanations of that.